Joining me now is former Levelling Up Secretary, Conservative Member of Parliament for Middlesbrough South and East Cleveland, the Right Honourable Sir Simon Clarke MP. Simon, welcome to the show.
Morning, Jake.
Good to see you. I know you are up in your constituency at the moment, so we really appreciate you joining us. Look, Simon, first of all, the Prime Minister pledged 7th of January, first week of January last year, that he was going to stop the boats. What, when you're out talking to people in Middlesbrough, do they think that means?
Well, I think they took the Prime Minister, Jake, at his word, and rightly so. And they welcomed what the Prime Minister said, because ultimately illegal immigration is a legitimate source of concern. We all recognise, I think, that having tens of thousands of people crossing to the UK every year who oughtn't to be here, who are overwhelmingly economic migrants, is not fair. And as the PM said in his press conference this week, makes a mockery of both our duty of care to genuine refugees who come to the UK through schemes like those for Afghanistan or Ukraine, but also places an unsustainable burden on our public services, costs the taxpayer millions of pounds per day in hotel fees, and frankly is an unmanageable challenge for any country. And we're seeing this all over Europe at this time.
So, Simon, so just to be clear, so stop the boats means 100% decrease from what you're saying, I think, so i.e. zero, no boats.
Yeah.
And did people think that he meant that within the year, within 2 years, before the next election? What do you think they meant?
I think that people quite reasonably took that to mean that there will be real, credible action, which would, at a minimum, be showing a trajectory which was sharply going down by the next election. But yes, ideally, would be fully resolved. And, you know, we have set out the Rwanda plan. That is a serious attempt to change the incentives that drive this evil trade. But in order for it to work, we need a human rights framework which respects the will of Parliament to actually make this happen.
So we're hearing from the Prime Minister, we've heard from her the last couple of days, I think we're expecting the Home Secretary to make an announcement in Parliament that their sort of fix, if you like, for this court case is that they're going to enter into a formal treaty with Rwanda. We're going to legislate in Parliament to say Rwanda, you know, is a safe country, full stops, no ifs, no buts, no maybes. And we've also heard from the former Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, today that that isn't going to work. Which side of the argument are you finding yourself falling on?
Well, I think experience teaches us that if you don't have the most maximalist possible legislation, then it won't work. And clearly, we've gone round the houses many times now to try and find a way through, which isn't kiboshed by the courts. And I think what we saw this week really does mean that Suella's words have to be taken very, very seriously, because you know, we've done our best and we'll continue to do our best to make sure that we answer all the court's concerns about due process in Rwanda. But there does come a point at which you do have to ask whether we need to disapply the relevant sections of the ECHR and the refugee conventions if this is actually ever going to work. And I think the ball is now in the government's court, Jake, to say why, if they don't think what she's saying is necessary, why that is the case, because it feels like the triumph to me of hope over reality.
And the Home Secretary's called it magical thinking. It's a phrase I've not come across before, Simon. But look, on the ECHR point, my view is actually, for what it's worth, that we need a British Bill of Rights. It strikes me as completely bizarre that a sovereign parliament cannot defend a sovereign immigration system. It is a 101. It is the job of government to defend our nation on our borders. It sounds like they're going to be a very, very long way short of leaving the ECHR, which would be my preferred position, and a long way short as well of this notwithstanding provision that the former Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, is pushing for, which seems to me may work. When this comes forward, what messages are you going to be sending to the government? You've been very outspoken on this already. You've done interviews already today. What messages are you going to be sort of pushing for the government to take on board in terms of your support for this policy?
Well, I think you're absolutely right that it's my view as well that probably we do need to leave the ECHR and replace it with a British Bill of Rights. But at a minimum, I think the exam question for the government this weekend with this new emergency legislation, which I welcome in principle, is whether the notwithstanding clauses that Suella is talking about need to be included. It is my view that unless they can very clearly set out why they aren't, that they should be included. Because I can't think of any worse outcome than raising people's expectations and hopes yet again, and then passing a piece of legislation which yet again proves not to work. So we have to get this right. We are in the last chance of even to get this right before an election. And I think people will quite reasonably hold us to account next year on whether we deliver or not.
So, Simon, one thing this reminds me of, we were both in the House of Commons together in 2017, where you had this sort of try again to deliver Brexit under Theresa May. The British public were just completely fed up of that. They just sort of threw their hands in the air and said, why haven't you done this yet? We voted to leave the European Union. We don't want to reopen the arguments about whether that was the right or wrong thing to do. But it is this sort of, this feeling that Parliament is completely unable to deliver on these policies that people found so frustrating. And is that what you're sort of picking up now when you're out and about talking to people up in your patch? Are you picking up this sort of the view of people, Bruce, what are you guys doing in Parliament? What is so difficult about this that means that you can't get it done?
Totally. And I think, people in Middlesbrough, South and East Cleveland are unfailingly, decent and realistic about the fact this would not be straightforward. But also there is a limit to that patience. And I think the government risks looking powerless in the face of the judicial obstacles that we keep running into. Okay. And frankly, of course, the consistent opposition and wrecking tactics of the Labour Party. They want us to deliver. They've given us every chance to deliver. But yes, as with 2017 to 2019, there is a sense here that this is becoming a fundamental test of whether the British government can in fact govern. And I think that mood of, get Brexit done, get Rwanda done is starting to really seep in.
Simon, finally, one last point. We see Italy has recently entered into a treaty with Albania, which will see 36,000 people return from Italy to Albania every single year. It's not quite taken effect yet. It needs to be voted through the Albanian parliament. How is it that Italy, who remains a member of the European Union, is also a signatory to the ECHR and the Refugee Convention, can get this right and we can't? Have we got to the stage in British politics where actually the Italian government is better run and outdoing Britain when it comes to running immigration policy?
Well, we don't want to find ourselves in that situation, and that's why getting this right is so important. I absolutely believe that returns agreements with countries like Albania can be an important part of fixing this problem. But the real value of Rwanda specifically is the deterrent effect it will have. It is for people coming from those countries with whom we cannot secure returns agreements. And we need to make this happen. It is, as I said a moment ago, about not just who governs Britain, but whether anyone can govern Britain. And I think that is now the challenge that we have to confront as a government. And if we don't deliver on this, I think we have to be really clear. If mainstream centrist moderate parties like the Conservative Party cannot show that we can do this, people will turn to more extreme forces. And I think that is a real warning to those of our colleagues who are slightly clutching their pearls this morning at the suggestion that we should have notwithstanding clauses in the legislation that comes forward. They have to answer the challenge that if we cannot deliver on this, I think we will be replaced by people who think they can and who will use much more extreme methods and frankly much more extreme language to address it. We don't want that. And just as with Brexit, the mainstream middle needs to show that it can step up and deliver. Otherwise, people will, as we see in other countries, turn to the extremes.
Simon, thank you so much for talking to us. That's Simon Clarke, Conservative MP, delivering common sense from the north of England. Thank you.